our Mid-Fairfield Substance Prevention Summit. This is our third and final summit through this project, so we are really happy to have you all here with us today. My name is Francesca. I am the project manager of the Mid-Fairfield Cannabis Prevention Project, which I'll talk a little bit more about later in the summit. We were awarded this grant through Positive Directions, who applied, which is the Center for Prevention and Counseling. It's a nonprofit organization located in Westport, and they seek to serve as, innovative community leaders in mental health, substance prevention, and they have peer support. And so they're really just doing a lot of wonderful things in their community and in the neighboring communities. So just a quick summary of why we are here today. As I mentioned, the Mid-Fairfield Cannabis Prevention Project, which is actually ending this month, has been just doing some great work. And our goal today was to bring our steering committee members together with local government personnel, elected officials, to really share what we've done. We're here to talk and discuss sustainability and prevention efforts and, all of just that work across the region. So what I do want to do before I go forward is I'm going to stop sharing my screen for just a moment, because I want to give a moment to have our prevention and coalition leads introduce themselves. They have worked very tirelessly with us through this project, and I just want to give them a moment to recognize who they are and to introduce themselves. So I'm going to stop sharing. And we can go ahead and get started with New Canaan.
Hi, good morning. My name is Colleen Proster. I'm the Executive Director of New Canaan Cares, and I'm also joined by my colleague Maureen Aziel, who is the Education and Program Manager for New Canaan Cares, and we are the local Prevention Council leaders for New Canaan.
Hi, I'm Susan Bliss. I'm the Student Support Coordinator in New Canaan Public Schools.
Wonderful, wonderful. So we're right for this moment, we're just gonna have the coalition leads introduce themselves, and then we'll give another moment for everyone else. If that's okay. But we love you, Susan. Thank you for your work and your help and your support. So we can go ahead and move on to Norwalk.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Keenan McMahon, the Human Services Director for the City of Norwalk. Thank you all for joining us today to listen, share, and learn about the important work that's being done. And I just want to thank my coalition leads and members, and Margaret and Francesca for their leadership too. It's been a pleasure working on this project.
It's been a pleasure working with you too. And we're going to go ahead, Westport, Kevin.
Thank you, and good morning. So Kevin Godburn, the Westport Youth Services Program Director. I'm also part of the leadership team for the Westport Prevention Coalition. So it was really nice to be able to be a part of this project and kind of sync so many of our efforts and energies together with our local regional cohort here.
All right, and Weston.
Good morning. My name is Rashida Miller. I'm the Youth and Family Social Worker for the town of Weston. And it has been a pleasure serving with all of you the past 2 years. So thank you for that.
Thank you, thank you. And Wilton?
Hi there, I'm Kim Hall, and I am the chair of Wilton Youth Council, who is the local prevention council for Wilton, as well as being the focused on youth mental health and well-being in our community. And it's been a pleasure to work on this project across the 5 towns.
Lovely, lovely. And Margaret, last but not least.
Hey everyone, so I'm the Prevention Director at Positive Directions. I'm also on the leadership teams of the Norwalk and Westport coalitions, and it was my pleasure to help convene these 5 towns when we went after the grant from Demas, and everybody thought it would make sense to try to take a regional approach because there are a lot of similarities among the 4 suburbs here, and we're all part of one retail market in Greater Norwalk when it comes to cannabis. And so this was a pilot project, which you'll be hearing more about today. And the heads up is what we're looking for is to end today with a robust discussion around what needs to be sustained, how can our towns help sustain it, is there a continuation of regional collaboration that our communities may want to look into? So thanks to everyone for being here. Also, we are recording it for the people who didn't get here.
And so, again, thank you all for these coalition leads that really have been working with us on this project. And we know we have a wide range of folks who joined us today. You know, the purpose we said again was to bring local government personnel and elected officials. So, you know, I saw you, Representative Mara, and other folks that are on. So we do invite you, please, to rename yourself, introduce yourself in the chat, your name, your role, your town, and as we move forward for today. All right, I'm going to share my screen back again. All right. And so we have three main objectives for today, which will form our agenda. And so what we're going to do is start off with the first objective, in which Margaret will talk to us about understanding the model and funding for youth substance prevention. Then I will continue and explain about the results of this pilot project, the regional pilot project, which we did focus on youth cannabis prevention. Which is the Mid-Fairfield project. And then Kevin will continue with some discussions for today on ways to continue the regional partnership and or address, you know, larger prevention gaps through the use of opioid, cannabis, and other funding sources. And then we'll have Colleen, who will wrap us up with some next steps and moving forward. So,
Great. So I'll kick off with understanding prevention. I know a lot of you are involved in the work, but you know we are happy to have select people here, other legislators coming in, and other local government decision makers joining. So some of this may be a little bit of an overview for folks who know. But when we're talking about prevention here, this is a prevention summit among the 5 towns. What we're talking about in particular is we're focusing on youth substance prevention or preventing youth risky behaviors in general. And what you're looking at on the screen is what's sort of widely accepted as the continuum of care in behavioral health. So behavioral health also refers to both mental health and substance and other sort of and risky behaviors. And we're looking at the left side of the continuum here in prevention, which starts, as you can see, not with even prevention, but with promotion. So promoting healthy communities, promoting mental health, promoting well-being, positive youth development. I'm going to highlight these terms throughout because that piece, there's really no funding for it other than for youth service bureaus and there's plenty of groups that do these things in all of our towns, but there's not like a sustained investment in the prevention side of things. And that's something I want you to be aware of from the beginning of this conversation today. Prevention then moves on to be, you know, well, I'll show you on the next screen. But anyway, prevention is something most of us aren't really fully aware of until we get into this world. Everyone's pretty clear on treatment, right? They're like, you know, oh, you could see a counselor for mental health or substance counseling. You could maybe go to rehab. You could take some medication. You could maybe go for recovery. You could join a social support group. But prevention, what you need to know is that in the United States is basically the mandate of grassroots coalitions called local prevention councils, or LPCs for short. Oh, sorry, next slide, Francesca. I can't move it. And so the folks that you just heard introduce themselves are pretty much all involved in leading our local prevention councils, or LPCs. And why is it not yet for that part. Why is the LPC the model for prevention? Because, you know, this is an old hack, but it truly takes a village when you're talking about this kind of work. So most of us are probably parents, or we have a kid somewhere in our lives. And if you think about, you know, your youth and how you would want them to be mentally healthy, and you really don't want them to engage in early substance use or risky behaviors like gambling or self-harm or anything like that, you have some control over the messaging you give them, the education you give them. And that's the sort of personal piece of this circle in this graphic that you see. But they're developing their own skills, their own beliefs. They have their own identity. They have awareness, or they don't, about different things. You, as the parent, have some impact on that in the household. But where else are they getting influenced in all of these things, in their beliefs, in their behaviors, and the risks they're willing to take or not take? They are being influenced by what happens at school, what happens in their neighborhood, their friend groups or lack thereof. And that's the social circle here. And then there's just the larger communities and, organizations that people participate in or don't participate in, right? Lack of services, lack of third spaces can have their own influence, or, positive or negative spaces that people participate in. And the reality is, if we want to create mentally healthy communities and youth who are growing up well and avoiding risky behaviors, we need to influence change across all of this. And beyond the community level, the largest and most difficult one to influence is systems work. And you see there that it mentions things like policies and inequities. And that's why prevention really requires sustained coordination across sectors. It requires 7 strategies, which you'll see in a second. But, think about that kid that you're trying to influence. Think about all the, you're like, I'm putting him in this, scout group and this leadership camp and this XYZ, and we're providing all these supports. But what if this youth is maybe in the population that we call dreamers, and there are currently, institutional reasons that they can't advance in their life? What does that do to their self-worth? What does that do to their self-esteem? What does that do to their willingness to, what does that do to their mental health? And then when mental health is struggling, people may be more likely to start using substances or engage in risky behaviors. So that's the big picture of what we're talking about, trying to address when we talk about prevention. And now if you can just click the next piece, Francesca. This is the model nationwide for addressing prevention. It's called the Strategic Prevention Framework, or SPIF model. And it starts with data. And it starts with data and building capacity. So what it really is a public health model saying, let's get all the people representing the personal, social, organizational, community, and systems levels. Let's get everybody who cares together. Let's point them in the right direction with data that tells us what our local problems are, because they aren't going to be the same community to community, even if there are similarities. Let's train them in prevention to the extent that is appropriate for their role. And then let's plan, implement, and evaluate different strategies. So what you can see here is there's a minimum of 12 required sectors: youth, parents, youth serving, all those groups that you see on the screen. Because if you are, and what you will find in prevention is, if you're lacking some of those key sectors, the work gets held up. There are bottlenecks if you don't have, if the youth and the parents all want something and the schools aren't participating, or if there's a whole lot of interest in certain kinds of laws, but then they're not being enforced, things can fall apart. Also, having the collaboration of all the right sectors and people that are local from the community helps to address the locally appropriate cultural factors. And then when it comes to the actual work, you can see the list of 7 strategies for community change. We tend to group them into individual strategies, where you want individuals and families to have information, education, and the supports they need. And then the environmental strategies, which are, do people have access to the resources they need? Do we prevent access to the things that are risks? Are there appropriate consequences for risky behaviors that are restorative, but send a clear message? Design and policies. And so the final step in the prevention framework, which is sort of built in throughout, is let's try to make all of this work ongoing and sustainable. That's our goal with you all today, because what I want to highlight here is, and you're going to see in the next screen, there is virtually no funding for the data collection and the staffing to make this stuff happen. And if you look at this and say, building local capacity, collaboration, training, planning, and implementing things, you realize there's a lot of management and coordination involved in that. And so how do we make that sustainable when there are like tiny little grants here and there, and occasional like larger grants, but they come to an end? And so I really want to set the stage today that by the end of today, we really want everybody here to be thinking about, what can our individual communities contribute to this conversation, contribute financially, collaborate? How can we try to create sustainability using what we're discussing today, which is the ends of our pilot project, which was limited funding. And so where do we go from here? So let's move on to the next slide so I can show you what we have in our region now. Oh, so here are some pictures of different strategies in action, right? Everything from, you know, events to legislative forums to information and so forth. But the next slide, please. Okay. So this is the stuff that maybe not everyone's aware of. You heard the 5 local prevention council leads be introduced at the beginning. So these are the 5 towns that are participating together. And the first thing I want you to notice is the amount of, in the first row, the amount of funding for prevention in our towns varies pretty widely. Norwalk does have the most funding for the work that I just described on the previous slide. It is, of course, the largest of the communities. If you add the populations of the other 4 towns together, they're still less than the population of Norwalk. But if you look at that 159,000 annual budget for Norwalk, 125 of that is from a federal 5-year grant that will end in 2 years, and then Norwalk will be back down to a city contribution and DEMIS, the state contributions, which come in the forms of 2 smaller grants. If you look at New Canaan, Westport, New Canaan, Westport, and Wilton all get some DEMIS money every year, and that is the local prevention council grant. What I want to make you aware of there is, it's like if you look at Wilton, it's $4,000 a year. It's targeted to a specific substance, and it doesn't really allow funding for staff time to coordinate and manage the process. So please be aware when if you think about all the work that I described that goes into prevention to make it effective, it's if it was located in our health departments in our towns, we would probably have like some robust, staffing for this work. Instead of which it's really left to kind of volunteer or grassroots coalitions to find the staffing, and try to put together ways to make this stuff happen. What else do I want to say about the first row? Another thing you can see here is that we do have some of our towns are contributing to the work on an ongoing basis. So New Canaan, Norwalk, and Westport have all dedicated funding at this point on an annualized basis to support the work of the Prevention Coalition. In Weston, the YSB uses some of its money internally for that purpose. I don't think it's dedicated specifically for prevention, like at the town level. I could be wrong, Allison and Rashida. But so you can see the difference in funding. Another thing I want to point out now, and this is very exciting in the Westport column, is we just got the new Building Resilient Youth and Communities with Prevention Award from DEMIS. So Danique is on the call representing DEMIS. Thank you, DEMIS. We haven't signed the ink yet, you guys. So this is like you're finding out before it's like official. But that's an exciting contribution for Westport, which will be 5 years of funding at the level that you see here. But again, after 5 years, then that goes away, just like the Norwalk 5-year funding will go away. So bottom line here is the different levels of funding lead to different results. So as you can see in the second row, only 2 of our towns are able to regularly conduct youth surveys, even though, like I said on the previous screen, the data is what points the way, right? The data gets people motivated. It's a call to action. It points out what's needed and where and how to implement strategies that will address those needs. But data, surveying youth costs money. So without enough money, we can't have good data locally. Then you move on to the final row of the table, which I'm sure you've been looking at, and you can see that in most of the towns with the level of funding and with people just, collaborating and resource sharing, without specified funding for this, most of the work is in the sort of individual strategies out of the 7 strategies I described. In other words, people are doing a lot more education and support and information sharing than they are able to do bigger level environmental work. In Norwalk, that list is longer and could be even longer still because we have more funding. So in Norwalk, we're able to work robustly across all 7 strategies of prevention. Everything braids mental health and substance use together. We have also, because of the value of the work we do, we've been able to actually get additional grants, including the New Canaan Community Foundation Systems Change Grant, to do really innovative citywide leadership and planning, bringing everybody together. So I hope I've painted a picture for you here that prevention matters, right? That it requires bringing everyone together. That it's not actually built into any of our town structures. It's not built into health departments, for example. It is the purview of grassroots organizations. And the assumption is kind of that most people are going to volunteer their time. And what we all know who do the work is you do need some dedicated project management. You need some prevention expertise. You really need some data. And so the differences you see here, we are hoping to have a good discussion by the end of today about what did we learn from the regional project that we're wrapping up by the end of the month, and what can we do going forward. Before we move on, I know I talked a lot showing you that stuff, but questions, comments? I don't think there are any. You can also throw questions or comments in the chat, but the next thing will be Francesca telling you what we've done with the project that just ended, and then discussion time.
Okay, wonderful. So I'm going to share my screen again. All right, so as I mentioned, I am the project manager for the specific Mid-Fairfield Youth Cannabis Prevention Project. Some of you may be familiar with it, some of you may not. And so I'm just going to go through and give a little back information about the grant and the state-funded pilot project. So in November of 2024, we saw that Demas, who we saw is on the call, issued the RFP for this project to address underage cannabis use. And so there were 10 awards. There were 10 awards that were awarded using the cannabis tax revenue, and each grantee received $57,000 to essentially do this work over an 18-month period. And as we mentioned, we know Demas is on the call, and we also did this with our RBHO, Catalyst CT, the hub. I'm not sure if Grace made it on the call. I know she was supposed to join in from a different meeting. And so through Demas and the hub, we then we received the grant through Positive Directions, and then began working using a collaboration of the 5 towns, which you see listed here below, but who also were the ones that introduced themselves earlier in this summit. And so with the 5 communities really working together, we sought to address the underage cannabis use, kind of looking at the retail market of cannabis, with Norwalk essentially being kind of the hub, and then the neighboring and surrounding communities, and how cannabis kind of flows through, or the ease of access, and just addressing different cannabis issues and concerns within the 5 communities. And so essentially the goal of the project was to build regional collaboration, which again, we've done with these 5 communities, and capacity that raises awareness about the risk of underage cannabis use, and reducing access to cannabis. And so these photos over here are just photos from our launch that we had when we kicked off the grant. And so in Westport, we kicked off. And some of you may have been there that day, and we were really excited to move forward. So the target sectors that we decided to really focus on, we have prevention in youth and parents, of course, but we really honed in on 3 specific sectors, which were law enforcement, schools, and local government. And so we had a law enforcement summit and schools, and done a multitude of work with these 2 other summits as sectors as well. And I'll explain a little bit later down some of the things that we did. And then we have you all here today at our local government summit, and different representative and elected officials who have been really supportive of this work, have been a part of different activities, and the work that we've done throughout the life of the grant in general. So we really thank you for helping us in helping to reach this project goal of building that regional collaboration and capacity. So when we were when we were looking at the issue of cannabis and what we were seeing, we kind of really saw four issues that we would say stood out. There's a large range of issues, but under cannabis specific, there were four that we really look out and stood out to us, whether it was specific to one or two of the communities or just like by all five in general. We saw that there was, low parent awareness of risk, which is why they were one of our target sectors. Low youth perception of harm is what the grant is essentially all about, but also just specifying on the perception. Ease of social access. We know in this social media realm, how easy it is to either get information, to get items, to get, anything in that realm of social media. And so cannabis happened to also be one of those items. And then I talked about us just looking at the ease of retail access in general. And so we looked at that as a whole again, and also in the five communities, but thinking to these different issues that came across, what were some of our responses to them? So when it came to the parent awareness of risk, we created a PSA together, which I'll hopefully get to play for you. It's not a long video. Some of you all were able to attend our speaker series and our different mass media messages where we connected with a Be in the Know campaign, and I'll show you some of that later. So we held focus groups with our youth and our regional youth team, and held school summits, and for our PE and health teachers and our law enforcement. Also with the ease of access, it was not just through social media, but it was also in person. We had youth report the use of THC carts, so the vapes and everything like that, in the school bathrooms or being available in the home. That was some of the things that came out actually as the project was unfolding. And so we distributed lock boxes, which I'll talk a little bit more about. And so we see all these different emerging issues on cannabis and our response. For example, with the retail market, we had our law enforcement. They've explained how they are challenged by the illicit sales in the smoke shops. When we had our summit, that was one of the challenges I would say every law enforcement member had mentioned. And so products also being available online. There's a whole Snapchat dealer community, I guess you can say. There's a whole Snapchat era where you can receive cannabis, or the youth can receive access in under 30 minutes. So we saw that there were a lot of emerging issues, and these were some of just the responses. And then we had our legislative forum, which happened in January, which was another one of our responses. It's an annual initiative held by Positive Directions, and it really just informs our legislators of current issues. So it's not just cannabis specific, but it talks about mental health, problem gambling, cannabis, the landscape. So it really touched on all of these issues that are going on in a broader spectrum, including cannabis, but on a broader spectrum, and just really address some of these concerns on a regional level. Okay. And so as you guys can see here, we have just some of the work that we've done, and specifically with the issue of parent awareness. So we had our speaker series that I'm pretty sure a lot of you on this call were able to attend, which was very informative. A lot of the feedback that we received, Dr. Amy Swift, we had Jordan Davis, who shared his story from addiction to advocacy. And one of the great things about the speaker series with Dr. Feuerstein, one of the greatest things about the speaker series is this is everyone from the five community. Everyone has ties to these communities and really just invested and involved in doing the work. I mentioned the Be in the Know campaign, which highlighted just different messaging across social media. I want to play a video. Hopefully it'll...
Think today's weed is like the weed you grew up with? Think again. Today's cannabis is no longer natural. It's been genetically engineered. Some teens are vaping concentrates with 90% THC. That can damage teens' brain development, lower IQ, and increase anxiety, depression, and psychosis risk. Cannabis is only legal in Connecticut for adults 21 and up, and illegal products may contain fentanyl. Know the risks. Help protect our kids.
So I'm not sure if any of you all have seen this video. If you have, I invite you guys, or if you were a part of the speaker series, if you've seen any of these videos, if you've seen any of the Be in the Know campaign, we had posters blown up. That's New Canaan Cares over there. We've had banners put out in Weston at the high school. So if you've seen any of these items, or if you've seen our video, if you attended the speaker series, we invite you to just either give us a reaction to it, or just let us know in the chat what you saw. We also have a link over here. I'm not going to click on it, but we do have a link where you can actually watch all of our videos all of the speaker series. So if you happen to miss one, there's a direct landing page that gives you all 5 of the series. And in addition to that, we had our youth create some short videos that were like for peers, by peers. That is also on the bottom of the landing page. So if you click on or the link, which hopefully, Margaret, I don't know if you can share it in the chat, you're welcome to just review and watch any of the videos if you happen to miss that.
And Francesca, in the chat, someone said they haven't seen any of these materials, and I will just highlight that as much as we've been investing in like boosting social media posts week after week with Be in the Know materials for months, and having all these speaker events and advertising them through all 5 towns, and then sharing out the recordings and so forth, it's very hard to reach everybody with messaging without the support of all the networks resharing. And also with, again, even though we're talking here today about what we've been able to do with this project regionally, it's not a lot of money, right? $59,000 divided over 18 months. So think big when we get to the end of this conversation. Like, what is it we need to do? What can we do? What's better with multiple communities together? But we hope we've made some impact here. So yeah, okay, I'll drop the link into the chat, Francesca, if you want to keep going.
Awesome. Thank you, Margaret, for monitoring that chat for me. There we go. And so, again, one of the issues, increased youth perception of harm. We did a lot of data gathering. So one of the things we did was create a regional youth team where we had youth members from each of the communities join together to do this on their level, to really spread that awareness, to have those conversations, to educate their peers, but also to provide us with data and information directly from them. And so these were some of the responses. We have focus groups, we did some surveys, and then also some of these were just through conversation that came about while working with them. So some of the things they are aware of, again, getting caught, they know that there are consequences, whether it's school consequences, legal consequences, they're aware of this, right? And so they know that there is an addiction component to it, and that you really shouldn't be driving while impaired, and the products can be laced. That's just kind of like a general consensus of things that they are aware of. But were a lot of knowledge gaps that emerged throughout this grant, that not only for the youth, but also for some of the parents as well. So there were a lot of learning that was happening during this project. And so the long-term brain impact. So they know the addiction, the body, and some aspects of the brain, but they don't really know the long term, maybe the short term, but the IQ, how many IQ points that you drop, how it really impacts and affects your memory, the anxiety. We know that. We've heard that the youth say, like, it could possibly give you anxiety, but they don't understand the long term, how it worsens, how it really affects them later down the line, especially if you start at a younger age. Psychosis and schizophrenia risk. We had Dr. Amy Swift that really spoke to us in the steering committee back in April, who really honed in on the psychosis and schizophrenia risk from what she was seeing, and so we really tried to get that information out to parents. We really tried to get that information out to the youth, and we used the youth also to share that with their peers, because that's what resonated with them, the hyperemesis syndrome, and the brain's producing anandamide. These were very specific knowledge gaps that were emerging throughout the grant that we were gathering as we were having these discussions with the regional youth team, but also folks that we were just encountering, youth that we were encountering through the project. Again, the fertility impacts and greening out. So I will talk a little bit more about that when I talk about the Johnny's ambassadors and how those all tie in together. But when we were having these conversations with the youth, and so this is our response, we saw that they were really wanting real peer stories, right? They wanted coach messages, like their coaches is kind of what they felt like the message was really coming through when they heard from their coaches, or really athletics consequences. So, our youth are very heavily involved in sports. And so activities. And so they really tie the consequences of their actions through the sports that they were involved in. And then so uh, honest brain and health risks. They just wanted it straightforward. They didn't want the cookie cutter approach. They wanted straightforward, real information that really hits home with them about the risks of what cannabis would do to their mind and their body, and messaging just like where it happens. And so these were some of the reactions that we would get from youth.
Francesca, just want to add, messaging where it happens meant they wanted posters in the bathrooms where people were, using, and things like that, like physical location.
Right. So they mention all the time that the bathroom is sorry, the hub, but it's their hub for where they can have ease of access, and that's where people go to hit the vape cartridges. And so some kind of messaging. There was a university that I had went and used. I had worked at, and they had like a stall street journal. So when you're in the stall, they had a sheet on the back of the door, which I thought was so cute, that when, not cute, but innovative, that when you're using the restroom, you can see all the information that they had out there of what was going on in the university. So putting information like that, because you never know what like information that you put out there really sits and resonates. So that was one of the things. And then also the youth also reported that the health classes, that the information that they were receiving there, they kind of go over the same stuff every year. So it's kind of been hammered home that almost it's like it's going in one year out of the other, because it's just been hammered home. So they're not really saying that information. So that's why we have, the Johnny's ambassadors and the Stanford Reach Lab, which I will go to here. We had our youth become trained ambassadors in the Johnny's Ambassadors curriculum, where they provided peer-to-peer education to over 140 students. They attended and also spoke at our school summit, and they focused on our focus participated in our focus groups. But through these educational components, because it was coming from their peers, they were really listening to what they had to say. They were kind of even almost shocked at the information that was being provided, but it was just like, this is the information that I feel like maybe they've been receiving, but again, it's not really sticking. So when you get it from your peers, or you get it from a different, curricula, they're able to really, it just opens their eyes. And so during the school summit, we had the Stanford Reach Lab come in, and they did a grade 6 to 8 curriculum, the Smart Talk for cannabis, and it was kind of reported that it was underutilized. And so you have these youth that are telling you what resonates with them, right? They're telling you this is what information you can share for it to really stick. And then we have these services which would go away essentially, if we don't, by not continuing, by the grant ending. We have the Johnny's ambassadors, who, while we were able to reach 140 students, we didn't have that many folks reach out to us, even though we kept sharing that they are available for use to come in and speak to you. Health classes, to come in and speak to your schools, to come in and speak to the youth in different organizations and programs. We were able to reach 140 students, but it was very underutilized. And also for the Reach Lab, we share that information. We had an expert come in and walk through it as well. And we feel like it was not really utilized. But this is what the youth are telling us that they will help stick for that information to stick. The youth also, our regional youth team that we created also participated in our 5-part speaker series. They created some media content, which I'll quickly play for you all. It's not that long, it's like 15 seconds.
Your brain makes its own happiness. Cannabis shuts it down. Anandamide is a naturally producing neurotransmitter from your brain to regulate mood, motivation, and stress. VHC mimics it, binding to the same receptors. The chemical that made you feel okay on a normal day starts to disappear. Anandamide and THC share almost the same shape. So when CHC enters your body, they bind to the same receptors. Your brain cannot tell the difference. Once cannabis is in, it hijacks it. Recovery takes weeks to months after stopping. The damage isn't instant, and neither is healing. Protect your mind and body.
So we have a number of these videos. Some of them are actually still being revised by the youth because they want them to be more face forward. So they're having their selves speak to in the video and showing their face. So it's really honing in on that peer-to-peer messaging. And so just highlighting again some of the work in response that we did. So we have our school summit that we did last November. We had almost 90 health educators and PE teachers from all 5 of the communities. Dr. Feuerstein, which we received really wonderful feedback on, came in and spoke to cannabis and its impact on the family, on the body, and on your mind, and the youth. He came and delivered a phenomenal message. So he also did our speaker series. So if you want to hear him speak, please visit that link. And then this is the same place that we had Stanford Reach Lab come in and speak and take a moment to really go through. We had our regional youth team, also some members come in and again, just share who they are, present themselves as Johnny's ambassadors, and invite and open the invitation to be able to come into the classrooms during this summit. And so we got some really great feedback from this summit. Okay. I'll talk a little bit about this summit and then I'll go back up. So the other summit that we also had was the law enforcement sector summit, where we had law enforcement leaders, legislators, 42 law enforcement leaders and legislators come and attend our summit back in July. Each of the towns shared those challenges about of the retail concerns. So again, this is where we kind of go back to that issue. They're shared about the retail market and how they would try to do their landscape analysis and their raid, but then when they shut down a shop, it's really hard to trace the owner or really hard to keep them closed because of many different facets. So they all shared their concerns specific to their town, but also very just broad. And then we had Attorney General William Tong, who was there, which was again phenomenal and amazing. And he addressed the concerns and what his office was doing and what he feels like the office. He also shared what the office was telling the law enforcement to do. Well, not to do, but how to address the concerns. My apologies. And then we had Demas come in. So Denise, who again is on this call, came in and spoke to just the landscape analysis and conducting it on a statewide level, but also then we just moved into discussion on how we can do this on a regional, local level. And so we then broke out into work groups and just really discussed on how we wanted to move these in the coming forward. And I just want to just quickly go back to this. We also addressed social access. So some of the things you may have seen across town, we had 415 lock bags purchased and distributed through this project. And so we divvied it up amongst the 5 communities to be able to pass out at different events or in just different capacities. And this was addressing access at home, because this is one of the things that came up between the edibles and just, different products. That's how youth reported that they were accessing cannabis. And so we really worked hard to make sure that the locked bags were really distributed amongst the different communities, but also if you did not have one, how you can receive one. So we make sure to really get that messaging and that information about safe storage out there. We shared being the no messaging, and then we also shared the physical bags, and then we also shared locations on where you can access one if needed. And then we also addressed the retail market, which was one of the larger aspects. And so we organized a 5-town landscape analysis. We identified different retailers using DCP and planning and zoning and police lists. And so we identified any liquor stores without endorsements. We were able to visit 50 real retailers. However, there are far more than that, but 50 through this grant was what we were able to visit, and just looked at what was on the shelves, what locations, like if it was behind the counter or not, what products were there. And one of the things that really was succinct was that when we were doing our landscape analysis, this was the same exact time that the Kratom ban took place. And so we were in real time able to put up posters at the different retailers, posters that were created by the Sacred Heart students. And again, this was all just happening in real time at the same time. So the Sacred Heart students were creating posters. We were planning on doing this landscape analysis. And then at the same exact time, the Kratom ban was taking place. And so all three of these things were happening. So we're like, how can we leverage this and make this all into one? So as we're out in the community, we're putting up different posters. We were sharing them also through the steering committee and through different listservs, that if you happen to pass by or drive by or stop in, to provide that information to these different retailers. And so that was one of the great things about the landscape analysis. And then again, just highlighting some of the findings that were there when we were out there. You can see some of these labels on some of the energy drinks and the products. We also noticed there was a difference between the DCP and the local list. Some of the retailers were either shut down or not completely updated. Some of them were inactive, but still actively running. They had an inactive license, but still selling. And so we just noticed some of those updates. There was a lot of Kratom that we were finding in stores. If you can see this third photo right here, this Feel Free product was right on the shelves as you walked in. And so, there was just a lot of findings and information that came out while doing this work, this landscape analysis. And we were happy to really be able to provide that information and then also report back what we found. We saw the fake urine kits, which was something of a larger discussion because I believe that was something that we thought went away. But as we're doing this work, we see that it's back here on the shelves. And through our discussion, we're like, okay, this could be a proposal for the legislative forum next year. And so
actually, just on that legislative proposal, I know Rep. Mara, who's on the call, and I had a conversation about that in real time. And I think that is one of the things we can move forward in our legislative work next year that she's interested in taking on, which I appreciate.
Wonderful. And then again, this is just some more findings and photos. You can see in this corner over here, these were the posters that we created. We put them right next to posters that showed buy one, get one free, Feel Free, which is again a Kratom product. We put the posters right there to let you know that this is banned, but also these are the resources that we can provide to you, because we don't want to just let you know that you cannot access this without also providing you with some resources. We had Sacred Heart students also create videos, but for the sake of time, I'm not going to play it, but you can watch those videos on Positive Directions YouTube channel. And we can have conversations, discussions around those. But I just wanted to share some more of the findings that happened during the Kratom ban.
Okay.
All right, and then we're going to move on to Kevin, who will talk
Kevin,
about.
do you mind if I just jump in for one quick
Oh,
second? Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Thanks. So I want to thank Francesca for presenting everything we did in this project. And for those who jumped on late, I want to mention, because we didn't at the beginning, we will send you the slides. We will send you a link to the recording of this session. For those who did just get here, we were talking about what youth substance prevention is, and Francesca just summarized our cannabis pilot project working with 5 towns. So now is where it gets really interesting, where we want all of you to talk with us about your feedback, what worked, what didn't work, what are the remaining gaps. And we're especially looking to our legislators, our elected town officials, our town government workers to think broadly and creatively about where we go from here. How can we with recognize that there's not a lot of funding for any of this stuff, and how important it is. And I do want to give a shout out to the legislators who are here today. We have Rep. Mara, who's been here from the beginning, Rep. Johnson, Senator Duff just joined. We have a couple of RTM candidates from Westport who I saw, Alma Sorelli and Louis Mall. Thank you for being here. We also have the first select woman from Weston, right? And if I'm missing anyone, thank you for being here.
Okay. All right, Kevin, we'll turn it over to you.
Okay. Thank you. And recognizing the time, I'll try to be relatively brief. So if you want to yeah, perfect there. I won't go through all of these bullets. So by now, we've shared a little bit about the work and the opportunities that were possible through this grant. And you heard earlier, Margaret mentioned, and just now, that every town is a little different with their funding, and you were able to see the difference between the funding streams across our individual communities. So that obviously it creates a lot of different capacities for our partner towns moving forward. So we know that time is scarce. It can be difficult to find volunteers across our various programs and projects. So having a central coordinator, I think for this particular one, was really helpful in help in connecting some of those dots. And I can say, speaking just for Westport, I feel like it really allowed us to streamline and maximize the time that we had with our coalition volunteers, so that we're able to lean on other risk areas like underage drinking, knowing that the cannabis work was being done through this partnership, and coordinated regionally. So it does seem like, I will say, it does seem like the more work we're doing to support our youth and families upstream, and some of you may have heard me say this before, it's having a positive impact on the work that we're doing downstream. We see it through either self-referrals from families and students, or from students that are coming to us through our different diversion programs. So that dedicating staff and volunteer time to continue with the cannabis efforts, will be important, but for many it may naturally come at a cost of pulling away from other areas. We're fortunate in Westport. We have some additional support and resources in place that will help us continue a lot of these efforts locally through the Prevention Coalition, but also our groups that we've had for a long time, our teen awareness group at Staples, the Westport Youth Commission, and other partnerships. However, we recognize we may lose some of those crosstown efforts, within this corridor, which have been so important. We know it's no secret. We know with things like travel sports and camps and art and theater programs, that many of our students are interconnected across this region, and absolutely with social media. If there's a party happening in Westport, it's known to students in New Canaan lightning fast, and vice versa. So having that consistent messaging across our region is super valuable. So just to kind of summarize, you see some of the things that may change here. We'll continue to work together because it's what we do. We're a good team, but the funding does go a long way. And you may have heard, as many of you probably been to our different legislative forums and heard that, and heard the challenges that we face. So it's taking a lot to keep up with the changing both state and national landscape as we move forward. So I think I tried to get that out quickly so we could move in, so we have time to to really talk about some of this stuff. If you want to go to the next slide, we've got some questions that we wanted to throw out there to the group. We've talked a little bit about some of the pros and cons, and this might be a great opportunity. I'd love to open the floor and give an opportunity for our other town partners in this. Because like I said, everybody is a little bit different with how they're funded locally, with the capacities that they have, with the types of things that they have underneath their individual umbrellas. So we'll start there with kind of what you thought were some of the pros and cons of this regional approach and how it may have helped your individual communities.
I'll start, I guess, from New Canaan's perspective. There's definitely pros and cons, and look forward to kind of bringing this work, the collaborative approach, which was the first of its kind for all of us, back to our partners within the community, Health and Human Services, Health Department, and our coalition to talk about, how this fits into all of our, education and prevention work. Having Francesca leading it was very helpful. You'd need a point person to kind of corral all of us to focus on the project approach when we're all trying to do a lot of different work on other substances or just, other behavioral health issues in our own communities. So the benefit of a regional coordinator was great. I think the lack of funding for 18 months for 5 communities, broken down, right? If you divide 57,000 by 18 by 5, you get a very small number. And just recognizing that if all of our communities think that this work is important, investment in the work needs to come from our local governments, our state government, and that approach. So just continue to voice those concerns on that. And a lot of the work we did then without receiving any of the funding was all on the back of our own fundraising needs or the money that we get from our town or, not really from the other grants because it's a separate subject and a separate substance. But all of that came from our own fundraising efforts and or town contribution.
I would also just like to add that a comment when we actually had the police summit, having the police officers come together and around a shared goal, and they really appreciated that. And also, we're talking about it would be great to tackle this through cannabis, through a shared task force from the police perspective. So there's a lot of collaboration in this work that all of us do with our local police department. But when we're thinking about it more broadly and we're all dealing with the same issues, it would be great to think about them as well in this work.
Thank you. And I want to point out there was a comment in the chat just saying that education is key, and totally agree. I think not to jump around with our questions, but I think one of the things that will be in my mind critical to move forward, and what I'd really like to see continue is that youth team, and having that having the students from our various towns together and creating programs and collaborating and working on different things. And like I mentioned before, with house parties and social hosting, having that education within our region and across town lines is super important.
The one thing I would also add is most definitely a pro of the regional approach is, even though we're 5 unique communities dealing with many similar issues, we're also dealing with some novel issues within our respective communities. And to be able to have this group and a regional approach, we were able to rely on one another and to work together to address those issues. And I think it made our work stronger and be able to be more impactful throughout Mid-Fairfield.
To piggyback on that, for Wilton, for us, the real benefit is in the collaboration and having Francesca as a center point person. Because that collaboration creates relationships that actually also help us in every area we work on. And it's nice that if I have a question and I've heard Colleen mention something about it, I know I can pick up the phone and call her. And I'm sure she would have been helpful with a cold call, but it's easier to make that call and to know who to call when you've been sitting in meetings together. And also, like Colleen said, for us, the biggest challenge is that this is a very small amount of money across 5 towns, and it actually created new work streams for us that were unfunded. And that's a challenge when you are already doing all prevention work with your funding for that is public funding being $4,000 towards a specific substance that was not cannabis.
Right.
So
I want to piggyback on that too, Kim, because this was a choice that we all made, right? At the beginning, the grant came from Demas, just to clarify for anyone. When the grant came from Demas, it was using the state tax revenues from the cannabis taxes. And the goal was to fund 10 individual communities. And, even in one community, $57,000 in 18 months doesn't make much of a difference. So I floated this idea out to the towns and said, none of us, most of the towns here don't have any money for cannabis or any expertise in it or any staff time. Do we want to try to put more of this money into a coordinator for the region on this topic? And so you can see, that's why there are pros and cons, because it did give all the towns an opportunity to do something related to cannabis and to collaborate with one another. And at the same time, it wasn't like, hey, Francesca, go do everything yourself. It was, the coordination is still there. And this is the reality of all prevention work, right? It's all about relationship building constantly, coordination, management all the time, all the stuff that is not funded. And the mental health part is totally not funded, and we're all trying to do all of it. So I think as we talk about how do we make this work sustainable, if we can move into sort of the big question and hear maybe from some of our towns, like our legislators, Danique from Demas, the folks here who are on the RTM or similar, functions. What are your thoughts on making prevention more sustainable? Because what we all see in prevention is you have to have some dedicated staff time. And that is essentially not funded unless somebody goes and gets a bigger 5-year grant. And most of the funding that we all get is substance specific, but all these things are related to one another. So if we had larger amounts of money to any of the individual towns, we could do some terrific work. What we're faced with is not a lot of money at all. And let's be creative. What do people think we can learn from this regional approach? And I would love in particular to hear from anyone who's got any purse strings or dollar distribution capacity on what you're thinking as you hear this today.
Do you mind if I jump in here a little bit? So, thank you so much for the presentation. We had legislation passed this year that actually increased the allowances of concentrations in some of the cannabis products, and as well as the amount of THC that's allowed in the beverages. I spoke out against that, and I put up a video. I mean, it's amazing how polarizing something like this really is. To tell you, my post went viral in the worst way ever. The amount of awful things that were said about me were really pretty shocking. I didn't know anybody ever spelled those words out and put them on a post. Really that bad. Thousands. But I guess one of the things that really surprises me in the funding and something I want to look at going forward is that our focus for the funding, initially had been really more like geared towards social equity. And, fair enough, but I think that, I mean, I could have projected that this would have happened. Maybe many of you could have projected that this would have happened too, that we were going to now get people addicted, reliant on cannabis. But the effects that we're seeing from the higher percentages of THC, I think, um, are pretty shocking. To me, I think that the balance of where we're putting the dollars that are coming in from the taxes really need to be changed. I think that we need to have a higher percentage going to prevent the prevention and recovery services. But in saying that, there's a big portion of it that has to go to DCP, and really should go to law enforcement as well, because they are doing, a lion's share of work in making sure that it is properly regulated. I've said this kind of many times that when and I wasn't in office when this was approved for adult use, but when that happened in the state of Connecticut, we basically took on the FDA's role here in Connecticut. And, NDCP really is kind of got the brunt work of that, trying to make sure that regulation goes through. So point is I think that I would like to see a better balance of the tax funds that are coming in. I think they need to be, they have to go to DCP for regulation. They have to go to our law enforcement. But the other point is that they have to come to prevention and recovery services. And clearly, I agree with you all that prevention needs to be something that we focus a little bit more on. So thank you for the work you're doing, and thank you for letting me speak.
Thank you. Sounds like someone's trying to talk.
This is Louis Mall, RTM District 2, and from Westport, Connecticut. And first of all, Kevin, if you are looking for funding, I think that the first place is your budget in the budgeting process. And if you make the proper case to your department head, and then it comes to the first selectman, and it comes from his budget to town and Board of Finance to the RTM, you will get funding if you make the case, and you will have my support for it. One of the things that got my interest in positive directions in this seminar is that we've had a cannabis retail for medical marijuana approved in this town, and they are moving their location from the east side of town to my district, District 2, right at the Norwalk Westport border, much to the objection of some of the neighbors and to my objection. And one of the things is that the Planning and Zoning Commission, they're, medical marijuana and so forth and so on, without regard to a lot of the other issues associated with the drug. I don't know if any of you have seen the New York Times editorial board came out with a huge article on "We Were Wrong About Cannabis" about a month or two ago. And it's really a significant admission by the Times about the harmful effects of cannabis and what we didn't know and what we do know today and what we're seeing. And there is also a follow-up in the wellness section on May 12th of 2026, what doctors have to say about cannabis and health. So it's not just a bunch of people saying, pot's bad for you. There are consequences to this drug. And so we have to get that education out there. We have to let people know. I'm particularly interested in doing more not less, as far as restricting what can be sold at a retail store in our town. So I'm happy, Kevin, that you and I maybe should get together sometime and figure out a few things that we might be able to do together. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Rep Mall. And I did want to say, I feel like we're very fortunate, and we've definitely felt very supported from the RTM, from the Board of Finance, from the Westport local government. When we present our budgets, when we put anything behind prevention. So I will say, I do appreciate that.
Danique, did you start to say something before?
No, I was coughing, but I will say something just related to the mini grants. So some of you may know me, some may not, but just for wanting to recognize that, not too long ago, I was in your shoes looking for dollars, prevention dollars. So really this pilot was the first brainchild of the funding that came to Demas based on the cannabis taxes. And although I cannot say what this will look like in the future, what I appreciate is just being able to be in the room. So the way that the pilot was originally designed was really based on kind of the virtual learning that I got from folks of how the mini grant process really works on the ground. And that was how kind of we came up with kind of the parameters for the Cannabis Coalition grants. So thank you for this conversation because it helps to inform what round two will look like. So even though I'm not privy to be able to talk about kind of what other funding is possible, but I think that the greatest takeaway is really wherever there is an opportunity for continued collaboration, I'm sure that you all will kind of seize the opportunity just based on the results that you've gathered from this first venture. So congratulations on the effort.
Thanks, Danique. So yeah, everybody, Danique is Demas's cannabis program manager and also used to be right down here in our region. So it's been great having her up there. And I still would comment on what Danique's calling the mini grant. This was a mini grant, right? It was not a lot of money. I think for the legislators here, when you're thinking about the amount of cannabis revenue that the state is tax revenue that the state is taking in, the 10 grants of $57,000 were the first amount of money that went to the towns. And so they were aimed at 10 towns. They ended up going to about 18 towns because we weren't the only people who took a joint approach. Our friends in Trumbull, Easton, Monroe also did, and we collaborated closely with them. But there's a lot of cannabis revenue out there. And, I think from a sustainability perspective, if we can really kind of just keep that conversation, like thinking locally, it would be so nice for this work to not always be grant dependent. Did you get the grant or did you not get the grant? Or did it, let's not have it all be mini grants. And so thank you very much to the towns who are making regular, annualized, dedicated contributions to this work. And on the screen there, you can see at the bottom in the bullets that, one of the bullets is the cannabis tax revenue. That's what funded this grant. One of the bullets is the municipal budget application. Some of our towns are doing that. We took this opportunity to pool our funds regionally. Is that something folks are interested in doing again? And the bullet we haven't talked about is opioid settlement funds, but places like New Canaan Cares are getting money from the opioid settlement funds. So without taking money away from our municipal budgets that need every penny for something, there are substance-related funds that towns can use that ideally would probably be used towards substance-related issues. Dominique or Rep Johnson, I saw you come on camera. I don't know if you were going to say something.
Apologies, was finishing up my lunch and excuse me, allergies too. I was noticing that I believe this week in Norwalk, they're making some announcements about the opioid settlement funds, and you all probably have more information than I do, but that made me think of, I see Human Services. Hi, Kat. Hi, how are you doing?
Good. How are you?
Good.
Yes, Representative Johnson, thank you for that shout out. We do, this Thursday, we are having a press conference at City Hall at 11 a.m. or excuse me, 11:30, and it is to announce the mini grants from the opioid settlement funds that we have been able to award local recipients who serve Norwalk residents, specifically in prevention and related to opioid addiction. And so we have a total of 7 recipients who will be honored on Thursday, and we have continued funds to dole out. So we encourage any organizations that would be eligible to apply to do so. And I'll be happy to include in the chat the link directly to our website and the grant information regarding the opioid settlements. So thank you very much, Representative Johnson.
Thanks for all your amazing work, and thank you, everybody. I appreciate it.
If I could just add one more thing, because I know as we're talking about the opioid settlement funds, we also have the tobacco prevention funds too. What I found, and I think someone mentioned this earlier, and it would be great if we could find a way to bridge this, but like for the tobacco prevention funds, they can't, like, to me, if you're putting something on a gas station that sold kratom, it seems like you would kind of hit the whole risky youth behavior altogether, like tobacco, vaping, cannabis, kratom, like you could kind of do it all together and have it be one big conversation. But the tobacco settlement funds only go towards tobacco issues. So that kind of, you know, I would be interested to see if anybody has any thoughtful ways on how something like that can be utilized to facilitate risky behaviors just on a whole.
I think it is what,
Yeah,
no,
go
go
ahead.
ahead, please.
I was going to say, I think that's a lot of the local prevention council's frustration around specific grants for specific substances when there's a spectrum of substances that, you know, instead of siloing them into a substance, that's frustrating on our end as well to facilitate that and limiting.
And the underlying, you know, root causes of why people engage in risky behaviors tend to be the same regardless of what the substance is, right? Yeah.
I had a question. Sorry. I'm Lauren Traum. I'm a new member of the Board of Selectmen in Weston. So thank you. This has been really informative, and excited to speak with Rashida and Allison about what's been going on in Weston. But one thought I had just when you were speaking and talking about specifically like the lock bags that were being handed out to parents for safe storage. Is there any education that's going to the parents? Because it kind of struck me that if these children are seeing their parents use these substances, that's then going to influence, you know, what they, even if you're telling them this isn't safe, but they see that their parents are using it. And so I was just curious if there's prevention or funds going to that.
So I can't say specifically if funds have gone to that, but I have targeted education towards parents. Allison and I have worked on targeting education towards parents. I know the schools have. I know that PD has as well. And we do have the lock bags that we gave out. We've had at the back to school nights, at the freshman forum, at the other events where we do tabling at the school. We do focus on educating the parents as well as the students.
And I just want to voice to you and Allison that, of course, as a member of the Board of Selectmen anyway, I can be helpful with this. I'm more than happy to be.
Thank you.
Wonderful, wonderful. And I think sometimes too, some of the lock bag distributions would contain material and information inside the bags as well, but a broader range of education is definitely necessary.
Thank you.
Yeah, and so we are going to go ahead and turn it over to Colleen, who's going to wrap us up with some next steps and close out our summit for the day.
That's it. I'm impressed. I have 1 minute. Here we go. Well, first of all, we just want to thank everybody by showing up and listening to this conversation, which was focused on kind of governments. But we're so proud of the work that we did with the educators and also the law enforcement officers as well. So you showing up and taking interest in this means that we're on the right track and we got to keep going. I guess the next steps is to take this information back to our 5 different communities and see if this regional approach is something that works well in collaboration with all the other work that we're doing, and continue to ask us questions. And we talked about the regional connections that this grant and opportunity gave us. And we can continue to reach out to each other to see what's working, and how to move forward. So thank you all. I don't know if Francesca or Margaret wants to wrap anything up from there, but our work is yet to be continued to once this grant is over with on June 30th. We can all kind of pick up that work in our own communities to keep the conversation going.
Yeah. I think just basically, if anybody here wants to reach out for more information, reach out to me or Francesca, or the person from your town. But I think, bear all these concepts in mind as you go into your next budgeting session next year. And if your local prevention council comes along and says, could we do X, Y, or Z with your opioid settlement funding or anything like that? And I think we do want to continue to see if there's a way. It sounds to me like one of my takeaways was that people felt like it was really useful to have Francesca as a dedicated resource for our 5 towns. And so for that to continue, we don't have another state grant for that, but maybe that's an investment that we share across various towns and budgets. And so we can continue those discussions. But thank you all for being here. Can we give Francesca a big round of applause for all her work all this year? Because you heard what a keystone she was, or cornerstone for all of this work, and we're so grateful to her.
Thank you all. Thank you all. And it was just a pleasure working with everyone.
We could not have done this without you, Francesca. Thank you.
Absolutely.
All right.
All right, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you all.